welcome to video 3 of our Retraining the Standardbred series. Hope you've enjoyed the first 2 videos. We've done our groundwork and backing, and we've done your basic aids in the walk and the trot. So today's probably going to be the video that everyone's really interested in, really excited about. Today we're going to look at establishing canter. We've got Buck here today. He's a little bit further along than the establishing canter point, but he's going to go back slightly and show everyone a little bit about how it's done and how we get started. It's really important though that you do have a look at the first 2 videos. I keep saying this, but it's like building a house. You really do need to have those foundations in place with your groundwork, which will feed through to your backing and then will feed through into your walk and trot. A lot of those basic aids and having him really on the aid and listening to you is going to go a great way towards getting your canter in place. Biggest thing with canter, I suppose, is going to be relaxation. An uptight standardbred will pace. It's an adrenalized state for them, and depending on how long they have raced for, they're definitely used to being adrenalized and that equaling a race, and for them, especially for the pacing bred horses, that is a pace. So relaxation is going to be key throughout everything that we try and work through today. If at any point in time your horse becomes really tense and uptight, you need to give them a long rein, go back to a walk and just give them a minute to regroup, relax. Give yourself a minute to regroup and relax. It's quite tiring physically and mentally sometimes getting the canter going in the very early stages, but it's an incredibly rewarding thing. The standies don't know how to say no. They will just keep trying, and that makes it a really fun process to work through. Sometimes it's a bit tricky, but I'm going to try and show you some stuff today to hopefully get you through some of the trickier parts. Good boy, ready to go? Okay. So, establishing that canter work in the early days, I said it before in video 2, in the walk and trot, and in the canter that's probably even more critical, is I have very little interest in his head carriage at this point in time. He needs to have as much chance to find his own balance and find his own legs as possible, and you're just going to struggle with trying to get him to put his head down. Apart from that not being a proper frame anyway, it's going to be very difficult for a horse that's raced with his head up for whatever period of time to think about doing 2 things at once, learning to pick up canter and also learning to carry himself in a frame. So for now, I've got a contact with his mouth, but I'm not particularly interested in dragging his head down into a particular position at this point in time. You need to get all of your walk to halt and halt to walk aids going. First of all, don't just jump on and canter. Probably don't advise that. And again, I'm here in an arena. I'm in an enclosed space, but it's quite a large arena, so that does help me. If you are in a smaller space, a round yard or a smaller arena, sometimes these guys are going to find it hard to pick up canter. It's they're used to working on that sort of 1,000-metre size track, so working in the smaller space can be tough. So if you have the opportunity in a largish paddock to ask for your canter, I do recommend that's great. The best possible place to ask for canter is actually on a little bit of an uphill slight curve. It seems odd, but I can tell you from experience that if they're going to pick up canter, cantering up a slight incline on a slight curve is the best shot that they've got. I have had some that I have helped, or some horses I've assisted with riders that were novices, and with those riders, they were a little bit unbalanced, and we actually began the canter work on the lunge, on a very long lunge. But it just allowed the horse to try and pick up canter without the added instability of a rider on their back and trying to balance the rider and think about left leg, right leg, left leg, right leg. It was all a bit much for that particular horse, and starting him on the lunge really helped him to figure life out without the added complication that a rider sometimes presents. So there's a few different ways to go about it. We've been very lucky with Buck. He did do quite a little bit of gallop work throughout the latter part of his racing career, And that has helped him greatly, particularly in the left canter, which is what he did the majority of his gallop training work on, was the left rein, so he has found that very easy. But some of them will not find it as easy. But the same basic principles that I'm going to go through apply, just the time stretch might be different. You may have to spend a little bit more time on some things, a little bit less time on others. We'll get him going into a trot. Good boy. And again, you want to make sure that that trot transition is clean. There's no pace or amble. He steps cleanly from a walk into a trot. He does it within 3 beats of you asking him. Good boy. He doesn't reef the reins out of your hands and all of that sort of stuff that we worked through in video 2. Building those foundations up, you've got not a lot of chance of getting a clean canter transition if you can't get a clean trot one. So make sure that we're getting the basics down pretty well. Like I said, I've got Buck just in a neutral frame here. I have a contact with his mouth, but I'm not necessarily hassling him about where his head is sitting. I do want him off the forehand. If you do have a horse that's leaning forward, I may try and raise my hands slightly. Not stomp, Bucky, come on. Just to bring the horse's head a little bit up off the forehand, because that can be very difficult to pick up a canter if a lot of their weight is on their forelegs. They've got to lift that leg to lead, and if their weight is on the foreleg, it's not going to work. Good boy. Now going off of this canter transition for the first time, being on a slight uphill incline, I'm actually going to probably try it up this corner here the next lap around. You'll start to find that your horse has got some specific places within the arena, within the paddock, on the track, on the trail, wherever it is that you ride, that he prefers or she prefers to canter in more than anywhere else. And that's absolutely fine in the beginning. Set them up for success. If they only want to canter in one spot, do it. They become a little bit context specific, and for a while they'll only want to canter in that one spot, but we need to take baby steps, set them up for success. Now with the canter transition, I like to lean forward for the first few transitions that I ask and actually take the weight off their back. It's not quite a jumping position, but I do like to just come off their back. I lift my inside rein slightly, put my outside leg on. As a canter aid, I sit, canter, canter, good boy. In the beginning, that's all I want, a couple of strides. It's very tempting when you first get canter to get really excited and go, I wonder how long I can canter for. And the truth of the matter is they won't be able to canter very long. Oh, mate. They won't be able to canter for very long because their body's not used to it. I always tell my students that I teach that it's a little bit like I've told you to walk your entire life, but now I want you to skip everywhere. And that's fine for the first couple of minutes. Then it gets really tough. So when you're first asking for canter, be really happy with a clean transition and 3 or 4 strides, and then bring them back on your terms. Don't let them canter for a half a lap, get all muddled up, start to amble, start to pace, start to fall on your face, all of those things, and they come back having not really learnt what it was that you were asking for in the first place. If you get that clean transition off the aid, bring them back, yay, good boy, good girl, they're going to have a much better chance of actually learning that canter was what you asked for. Buck's been very relaxed throughout this process. Some horses do get super tense when you first ask them for canter, and you have to make a massive fuss of them. You have to look really silly. Good boy, you're so amazing, you're so clever, because it's ingrained in them from a racing point of view that gallop canter is definitely ultra super mega wrong. You'll get in trouble and you'll get told off for doing it. So you need to just be able to re-establish canter as a yes thing and pace as a no thing, which takes time. We'll step through that canter transition to the left a couple more times just so you can see a little bit of the nuances of what I ask for. I've got my inside leg on the girth to stop him leaning in. Canter. Good boy. I've got a slight forward leaning position. I'm just taking my weight out of the saddle. I'm not up out of the saddle in a jump position, but I am just slightly off of his back, which does help him. Good boy. I've got my inside hand slightly raised, what I asked for the canter, which just lifts the bit in his mouth slightly. Gives him an indication that this is the leg I want, this inside leg. Good boy. We'll do a couple more. Trot. You can hear I'm still using my voice aids. The voice aids that you would have established on the ground. The horse has probably got some of those aids established from his racing days, and Canter will be a new one for him. Good boy. Good boy, Bucky. So we'll go through again. Inside rein slightly lifted and up on his neck. Your inside leg up against the girth to stop him pushing that shoulder in and putting his weight on the inside shoulder. Sit, outside leg, canter. Good boy, canter. Good boy. Good boy. Now, as I've said, Buck's a little bit further along than establishing canter. He's most of the way to being established, we hope. Ooh. But still, anytime the quality of his canter starts to get a little bit muddled, a little bit soft, oh man, oh, careful. I will bring it back. There's no point trying to push through a muddled, pacing, ambling type canter. You are better to actually bring them into a sharp downward transition to try and delete that pace where you can, and ask for canter again. They will start to learn themselves, and they'll start to want to actually do the transition for you after a little while. It's like they understand that the brain is connected to what you're asking, but the body's just not quite there yet in being able to follow. And you can almost feel them going, oh, I'm sorry, hang on, I've mucked it up. Let me fix it and start again. So you will find that they will come back a little bit on their own at some point when they start to mess up the canter and it starts to feel a little bit pacey. Good boy. Now I am giving him lots of walk breaks, mainly because it's very difficult for me to talk and ride, but also it's very important when you're establishing canter to give his body and his mind a bit of a break, particularly if they are uptight at all. Bucky's anything but uptight, so we kind of have that on our side. But I have re-educated a lot of horses where canter in the beginning is quite a stressful process. So I can't, I know I harp on and on, but I can't stress enough how very important it is to keep them calm and relaxed. Lots of good boys, lots of pats when you're asking for that initial canter stuff. I'm in an arena, as I said before. If you want to actually try this out in the open, out on the trail often is a really good place. Particularly if you've got your walk and trot established and you've got it set up and you have been working on that for a few weeks or a few months, depending on the horse, where you're comfortable that he's on your aids in the walk and trot. You've just got to get the canter right. Out on the trail, up on a nice hill or a nice incline can often be a really good spot to start asking for canter. Good boy. Now, always the trickiest part is you'll start to understand and you'll know before you begin asking for canter, you'll know your horse's good and bad reins. So, as I've stated throughout the first couple of videos, start on the good rein first, set them up for success, let them get some kind of an idea of what you're asking for. Don't make life more difficult for yourself and for your horse by trying to get the hard rein done first. Set them up, give them something to think about, then step on to that trickier rein. For Buck, that is to the right. Which is the opposite way to what he would have raced. Some horses it is to the left, and the way that they race, they just seem to be a lot more inclined on that rein to want to pace instead of canter. Every horse is a little bit different. I do find as a general rule, most riding horses find anything to the right a bit harder than to the left. I'm not sure what that is exactly about, whether it's man-made or it's something in their own makeup, but definitely the right rein is harder for bucks. So again, we will go through that same sort of process that we did a little bit earlier, making sure our trot transition's clean first, and then he's trotting along in a reasonably forward manner without being too uptight, too tense, because a tense horse is not going to canter, or he's not going to do it well anyway. Good boy. Now I have got my inside leg quite solid on the girth here to really keep him off this inside shoulder. Racehorses love to corner like Grand Prix motorcycles. You need to get them off that inside leg if you're going to have any chance of him picking it up at the right time when you ask for canter. So your canter transition is going to come from the back legs first, but in the standy, they are used to pulling and going forward onto the forehand as opposed to driving from behind. So in the early stages, getting the weight off of this inside leg, even if that means using your crop, just gently pressing or rubbing or tapping on that shoulder to get the weight off of it so you have got some flexion. If a horse is counter flexed, Bucky keeps wanting to stop today, he's had enough. If a horse wants to counter flex, he's not going to canter. I'm going to go uphill here, inside rein, outside leg, canter, good boy. Good. Couple of strides and we bring him back. Getting those transitions really clean, quality over quantity, all day, every day. I'd rather that you came back in from a ride and said, I got 6 perfect strides of 3-beat canter, than I got 6 laps of really garbage, pacey, ambling canter. Good boy. We're going to ask again, inside leg on the girth, crop here as well to keep him off the shoulder. Canter. Again, that little bit of weight. Woo! It's exciting. That's why he's named Buck. Now that's not an unusual response in the early days when they're trying to find their feet. They're trying to figure out exactly what this all means. Sometimes it's hard to use your back end, and if you're like Buck, you get a bit cranky and you put in a buck. So be prepared for that. Try it again. Good boy. Good boy. Good. Now on the straight's the hardest bit normally, and you'll find that they start to wander around, get a bit lost. If you need to go quick in the beginning, please do. You're not going to get a show ring canter the first time you ride it. So if it needs to be a little bit quicker, let him go in a rhythm that he's comfortable in. You can see I've still got that light seat, staying just off his back a tiny bit. Got a decent contact on his mouth without holding him. But you will find that sometimes they actually like to be held. I think it's a bit of a, ooh mate, good boy. I think it's a little bit of a, ooh, throwback from the having a head check on, where the horses that wear head checks often use it as a bit of a support. When they lean into the bridle, it helps them when they're going forward at quite high speed, just to balance that little bit. So you may find that having quite a strong contact with their mouth can be reassuring to them. But it's a little bit of trial and error. Some horses, if you take too strong a contact, will actually be more inclined to pace, because in a racing situation, they'll do a lot of their jog work with the reins quite loose. Driver would almost have them in their lap. And even when they do their preliminary work at a race, they would have probably a slightly longer grip. And then when it is business time, they will pick them up a little bit shorter. So you can have horses who, with a very, very strong contact, they they do get a bit tense. So with Buck, he does like a strong but elastic type contact. I haven't got my elbows locked into my sides. I'm not gripping and holding with my forearms. I'm giving him support and balance when he wants it without having a death grip on his mouth, if that makes sense. It's probably not the most technical term, but it's the one I'm going to use for now. We're going to change rein. As with the first two videos, we're kind of covering a fair bit of ground. You wouldn't do all of this in one lesson normally, but we're trying to sort of give you all of the tricks and all of the tips in the one go that you then can work through over a few weeks, a few months. Every horse is going to be a little bit different, so don't feel, oh well, she's got that all happening in 30 minutes, I should be able to as well. Give your horse the time that it needs to get it right. Lots of praise, lots of good boys, and lots of walk breaks in between. Good boy. All right, we're going to move forward a little bit. You've established that canter. You're probably getting a few strides, half a lap, a full lap, whatever it is. We're going to work towards refining the canter a little bit, setting him up a little bit, getting him to use his hind legs and drive from behind instead of just dragging from the front. Good boy. So this time, same concept, but we're going to stay a little bit more in the saddle. Sit a little bit more upright. I've got that strong but elastic contact to his mouth. Good boy. Good boy. Now I'm putting a lot more of my weight into the saddle. I'm sitting a lot more upright. And you'll start to see that he's a little bit less on the forehand, a little bit lighter through his hind legs, or through his front legs I should say, and he's using his hind a little bit more. Whoa, mate. Whoa. Good boy. Buck's still getting used to coming back from the canter to the trot with the least amount of ambling. When you're first re-educating him, that is going to be the spot where the pace creeps back in. He's in that downward transition. So what you want to do, well mate, is actually be reasonably strong in getting that downward transition. You want it sharp. I mean, you don't need a Western style sliding stop, but I do find that if you're just sort of gently going, okay, maybe trot please a little bit, you're going to get half a lap of that garbled, ambling, tranter type movement that you really want to try and delete as much as you possibly can. So I am quite strong in closing my hands on the reins, sitting quite deep in the saddle. I'd almost be happy with the transition being too abrupt at this point in time. You can refine that a little bit later. It's easier to sort of soften a transition a little bit that's got no pace in it than it is to try and delete an ambly pacing type movement in between. So we'll go through and we'll have another look at that canter again. Like I said, we've sort of worked past the establishing spot, and we are going to begin to sit up, try and get him to use his back end a little bit more. And then within that, we're going to start to try and ask for some slightly smaller circles, which is a real test for them in terms of being able to sit back on their hind legs and move and do the right thing. Good boy. Good boy. All right. Sitting, outside leg, and staying tall in the saddle. Good boy. Get up. Good boy. Good. You can hear I just click him up every now and then when I feel he's getting a little bit flat. Good boy. Using that strong but elastic contact to just bring him up off the forehand. Try and sit him onto his back legs. Good boy. And then we're going to try and go a little bit smaller. Test him out. You might have to steer a little bit ugly at first. It might get all messy. Do what you can. Good boy. Good. And tell him. Oh. Good boy. Good boy. So with that initial canter work, doing a smaller circle, then coming out of that, it's quite difficult for them. So make sure you do give them plenty of praise, talk them through it. Now we're lucky the wind has died down here. This is an incredibly windy place that we're filming. We've had our challenges over the last few weeks, but the wind is also important, not just from a filming perspective, but I can tell you from experience that in the early days, the canter is so fragile on these horses that a strong headwind seems to blow it over. So on those days, if you're in a nice open place like this and it is blowing a gale, don't be surprised when you're heading into that headwind. If your horse really does struggle. I do find that, and I do laugh because I just think, you know, how could something be so fragile? But it really is. On a very, very windy day, when they're first learning to canter, they do struggle. It's really tough. That's where your position is really critical in all of this, trying to stay still and an active rider without impeding them. You almost got to try and stay out of their way and support them a little bit. And being really strong through the core and strong but giving in that elastic contact will go a long way towards helping them support them through this tricky part of their retraining, but really very rewarding. There's nothing more exciting than getting those first canter strides and coming inside all chuffed, saying, yep, we got it, we figured it out. And these guys really do seem to show a little bit of pride when they're told that they're good and they understand and they're learning something new. They're fantastically trainable horses. So we've done a little bit of work in terms of refining this canter slightly from the early aids. In the early days, it really is a matter of any canter will do. Even if it's the wrong leg. Initially, Buck had a really hard time picking up right canter. And we, for the initial first couple of weeks, canter on the left leg was fine. Going to the right, I mean, it was awkward, it was uncomfortable, but I needed him to, at the very beginning, respond to the aid and understand that canter was okay. The fact that his body just couldn't quite give him the exact correct answer, you know, it was irrelevant at that point in time. It's a shaping process where you're shaping the response. At first, you know, on that scale of training, the basic response is all that you're looking for. As crude and as messy and chaotic as it might be, when you dig deep down, is he giving you the answer to the question you've asked? And if it's yes, close enough, at this point that's fine. So Bucky's good on the right leg now. Hopefully he'll give us the right canter. But look, if it's a left leg at the early stages, that's fine. But once you've established that right canter, you've spent a couple of weeks getting the aid in place, now's the time to sit up as I did on the left rein, try and get them to drive a little bit more from behind and stop being quite so on the forehand. Drop. Good boy. Same thing, we're going to try and stay a little bit deeper in the saddle. Canter. Good boy. Good boy. So what we want is to keep that inside leg on the girth, because this is Buck's bad leg. He does tend to want to lean a little bit and counter flex. So we do have to work a little bit harder to keep him flexed the correct way. Get him to try and place his weight onto his hinds, come a little bit up off the forehand, be a little bit lighter in those front legs. Good boy. Good boy. That's it. Good boy. You notice that I'm just talking him through, clicking him up when he goes a little bit too slow and loses the rhythm. Good boy. And just like the other rein, we're going to try for a slightly smaller circle. Again, weight in the saddle, steering him round, driving him forward if need be. Good boy. And back to the trot. Good boy. Ooh. So you see what I mean, Buck's transitions at the moment are quite abrupt, but they are reasonably clean. So that's something that we're working on. He's certainly not a finished product. He's a little bit further along than what we're currently teaching, but not a lot. You know, at this point in time, he's only 3 or 4 months into his retraining journey, and the brain is trying hard, but sometimes the body takes a bit of time to catch up. Good boy. Good boy. So like I said, it's a little bit difficult with Buck because if he was any more laid back, he'd be going backwards. But a lot of them do get quite tense. So these walk breaks are really critical. They're also critical for me to be able to talk to you and ride. I hope you're very impressed with my fitness. Because the canter on a standy in the early days is quite physically taxing for you and them. And it does require a bit of work on your behalf to, like I said, stay stable and strong through the core and strong in the saddle and not hamper them in any way. So what we've gone through today is getting this canter work established, and that's just getting a basic crude aid to the canter aids, getting crude aid and a crude response in place, and through that inside rein and inside leg, keeping them off of that inside shoulder, being able to allow them to lift that leg. That's really crucial in picking up canter. A horse that's counterflexed is going to find it exceptionally hard to canter. So keeping that flexion correct, even if you've got to lift that inside rein slightly and press it against their neck, almost in a neck reining type fashion. Not super strong, you don't need to cross your reins over, but just a little bit. Staying a little bit light in the saddle in those initial canter strides. I don't know why that works. I don't profess to be an expert in everything. I'm just teaching you what I know and what I've done for the last few years that's worked very well with all of the standardbreds that we've re-educated to a very high level. Bucky's demonstrating rein back here when I'm not actually asking for it, so we'll bring him a little bit forward. Good man. Steady. Stuff like this is actually really important for the standies as well too, and that's where some of your work outside the arena is really fantastic. Going on a trail ride, having a stand around and having a gossip for 10 minutes is very important in just getting them to be a nice, well-rounded member of society. As a racehorse, you figure they haven't done a lot of standing around. When they're in the cart, it's business time. They're moving and they're traveling and they're going. So stuff like this is a little bit foreign. You can see Buck sort of chewing and he's bored and he's, what are we doing next, lady? Let's get happening. So even just this standing around stuff in between your canter work is really vital. It'll give him and you a break physically, but it's also teaching him something else. I'm a big believer in using your rest breaks to try and make the most of your training sessions. You're giving them a break, but you're still teaching them something else. You're just going to something that's a little bit less physically taxing. So we've gone through establishing that basic canter response, and we've gone a little bit of the way into refining that canter through sitting up and in the saddle, picking up your contact slightly and starting to get them to sit on the hind leg and really push through from behind instead of pulling from the front legs. So in the next video, what we'll probably try to look at is refining the picture, and that's refining your walk, trot and canter. It's all 3 paces. You've got your basic aids, your basic responses, and you've worked through some exercises to get to that point. Now's the time where we try and bring it all together and make it a little bit prettier. I've harped on and on about not wanting to pull his head into a position or squash him into a frame that he's not comfortable in. In the next video, we will start to look at bringing him into a little bit of a shape and a frame, get him using his back end, using his back a little bit more, and just generally bringing all the picture together. So I think that that's about it for Canter. As I've said, plenty of walk breaks, plenty of rest. Don't try and do what we've done in this video in one shot. It won't work. Unless your horse is some sort of superstar, then call me because I want to know about it. But yeah, take your time, work on all of the things that we've shown you today, and we'll get ready for video 4 where we can refine the picture a little bit. Thanks for watching. Good boy, Bucky.